Welcome to Graphic Policy Radio. This is your host, Ilana Levin, and this is a comics podcast. And this is the comics podcast for people who care about the people who make comics. Today, I just learned a number of extremely talented people were laid off in a merger between comics publishers. I hope the rest of the community will keep their work in mind, supporting them financially by buying their comics and connecting them with other opportunities in the industry so we can keep reading comics from these diverse and talented people in the future. And joining me today is a really amazing new talent in the indie comics world who I'm excited to have come on the show. Ben Kahn is a comic book writer based in New York. Their latest series, Gryffen, Galaxy's Most Wanted, is their third collaboration with artist Bruno Hidalgo after Shaman and Heavenly Blues. Gryffen is a genderqueer, anti-fascist space opera published by SBI Press exclusively on ComiXology. And Heavenly Blues sees a ragtag group of deceased thieves condemned to hell team up to pull the ultimate heist on heaven. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. Good to be here.
Yeah. I think, did we meet at Forbidden Planet at the comic book shop?
I think it was one of those things where through New York, the New York comic scene met at a few different places, like a Mysterious Time Machine, at a party, here and there. So a convention. So one of those multiple meetings lead up to an introduction.
Excellent. And I'd actually heard about your work. Just separately from having met you, a friend of the show, Peter Hagnes, was telling me about, I don't remember what it brought up, but he'd mentioned to me that he really liked Heavenly Blues. And then I was like, oh, I just met Ben, so I should probably check that out then.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And he was right. It's really freaking awesome. I'm really enjoying your comics.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm still very much at the phase of, oh my God, people are reading a thing I wrote. Mm-hmm. I kind of hope that never stops being awesome.
I mean, yeah, it is awesome. It is awesome. So how long have you been writing comics?
So I started way back when just doing a very silly kind of 4-panel video game-based little sprite comic when I was 15. And I did that through all of high school and a good chunk of college. And then as I kind of discovered more, Marvel, DC, Image, Vertigo, just this whole new world opened up a whole new world of possibilities and stories. And, a lot more you can do than with 4 panels and some video game graphics you got off the internet. So me and Bruno first started work on our first book in 2012, which came out in 2015, which was Shaman, which is published by Locust Moon Press after a successful Kickstarter. And then, then after that, we've never stopped working together since. So really, me and Bruno have been kind of in some fashion working together since really kind of late 2012, 2013.
Yeah. So how did you guys meet?
So we were originally connected through the publisher Locust Moon Press. The book was edited by Chris Stevens and Andrew Carl. And just based off some of the artists they had worked with in the past, especially their Once Upon a Time Machine anthology through Dark Horse. Mm-hmm. We kind of had a bit of a certain amount of artists we were looking at potentially for the book, and right away Bruno just stood out for this really unique style and way of just drawing people and bringing such personality to the page. So he was kind of the person we reached out to, and it's been a fruitful collaboration.
Totally. I know a lot of folks who are new to writing comics just don't really know where to begin when it comes to finding art partners, There's so few people who can really do the art sometimes.
That's definitely where I was at, and I was lucky to have people to kind of show me the way and help me put that first creative team together.
It's interesting. Looking at their art, I thought immediately of Jamie Hewlett's drawings, and then also somewhat later when I was reading Heavenly Blues, which I read Gryffen before I read Heavenly Blues. You guys had these really cool little devils carrying one of the characters down to hell, And I was like, and then that's a little bit of Mike Mignola. So that's a cool combination.
Bruno has, I think, just some of the coolest influences. I think you can see such stylish, personality-driven styles within his own art. And I think, especially with just kind of this muted, kind of, like just his sense of fashion and style, bring his own sense of it. And I always love artists where you can tell who drew it with almost every panel.
Yes.
And I feel like Bruno is always putting his own touches, his own personalities into the world constantly. And as a writer, that's just so much fun to see what he'll create and what he'll make of like what I've written.
So how did you develop the idea for Gryffen, the latest series?
So Gryffen came partially out of kind of sensing that there'd really been a bit of a revival in that kind of traveling spaceship like genre. You know, like Doctor Who had obviously made a successful comeback, and then, you know, started to be new Star Trek, The Orville, Legends of Tomorrow, even like, and I think it was like the Black Mirror episode, USS Callister, that it just had critical mass where it just made me go, you know, I want to make a spaceship adventure series. And but Star Trek, Star Trek came from a place of hope and optimism in humanity's best qualities. And, circa 2017, that kind of hope and faith in humanity's goodness, not kind of in short supply these days. So, I kind of want to take that Star Trek setup of showing the future, showing humanity's potential, good or bad, and really with the emphasis on science and what science means, but really apply it to a character in a world that really was kind of grappling with these issues and just utter, like, existential loss of faith in humanity.
It's, I think, like, just from the very first panels of the issue, you have the protagonist just really giving a blistering critique of the military-industrial complex that is applicable today as well as in this distant future story, but also with a great sense of humor. Like you're doing both of those things at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, thank you. I mean, I'm not generally good at writing super serious all the time. Especially, and maybe this is just me going back from my webcomic days where the goal was, all right, you got 4 panels, make them laugh every day. But to me, and in a way, I think, actually, in a way, Gryffen is, like, the character of Lila Gryffen does kind of harken back to some of my webcomic days, which, for the record, was, please don't go looking for it.
Duly noted.
It was, I started when I was 15, raised on South Park and Chappelle Show. It was not a great time, but the characters were kind of more psychotic, but very driven, very loud, very brash, but had a lot of forward momentum, didn't need a story to affect them. They could be, like, these characters could almost be a wrecking ball into other people's stories. So, kind of, back then it was all just in pure teenage, edgy, not nihilism humor, but still taking some of those character types, but putting it more in a real world context or with hopefully a little more to say and putting a little more substance behind the brashness to really just trying to create a protagonist that can kind of be my mouthpiece for all these various different issues, but someone who can just propel the story forward in hopefully a wild, entertaining way.
So Lila uses they them pronouns, and do they identify as genderqueer or non-binary specifically, or like what?
So it's they identify as non-binary. In chapter 4, which will be coming out in late June, is where they specifically state that their pronouns as they them. In the first few issues, they do get misgendered a lot in the series, which is a big part of it, because it's, to me, as I found, is part of the non-binary experience, because there really is no default they, them look. But it also becomes a way of showing the characters' familiarity with them, their increasing loyalty to them, and as characters get to know them better, the shift in pronouns becomes a bit of a way of showing the characters' growth in relationships as they come to more of an understanding of this wild, chaotic mystery that's kind of blown into the universe.
And I think that I got that even from just the part that we had. Like, I think there was something really pointed from Lila's ex, who I won't give away who that is for those who are reading, just picking up the comic now. But like, Lila's ex misgenders them in a way that felt really like, well, that's definitely part of the reason why you are an ex. It seemed rather really character driven and connected to their history together.
Yeah, and that was absolutely intentional, just showing that, this is a fascist nightmare empire. They're generally not too great on the queer rights. But also just kind of showing that, in this world, unfortunately, and this is just true for, I think, in our world right now, just existing as who you are can be an act of rebellion.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that the series did a really great job with introducing that aspect of the character.
Thank you. I hope. I know it's not. No, there hasn't been a ton of non-binary representation, so I hope I'm putting out something good into the world in that regard.
Yeah, and it's ridiculous how little science fiction, includes it. Like, obviously, there have always been non-binary people forever, and in very organized structures, even in different cultures and societies over time. But certainly now they're in this particular part of postmodernity in which we live today, there's like even more people who are identifying as non-binary using those particular terms. And we know, like, looking at the demographical information we have of younger people, that, that's just going to be increasing in time as people feel more comfortable claiming those identities and expressing themselves. And so the idea that there's so much science fiction being made now that doesn't include that is really stupid.
And I agree. And it was important to me that Gryffen being non-binary isn't in itself science fiction, that this isn't the result of genderless robots or genderless aliens or magic or cloning. This is a regular flesh and blood human being who identifies as non-binary.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah, totally. Not to sidetrack too much, but one of the characters that I'm doing at my current RPG game is non-binary, and I had to sort of make people not assume that was because they were an elf or are an elf, whatever, they're fictional. So were or are, it's all relative, but was not particularly tied to their species or their status as being a super scientist. It's like, no, that's neither here nor there.
Exactly. Right.
So, yeah.
Awesome. You wanted me to get back to the opening monologue.
So the opening monologue, super bombastic. I really enjoyed it. I wasn't sure if, did you put into the script and one of these motherfuckers looks like Trump, or was that Bruno just being like, you know what, one of these motherfuckers should look like Trump?
That's Bruno saying that one of these motherfuckers should look like Trump. Donald Trump is also is also in hell in one scene, in one issue of Heavenly Blues as well.
Yes, I noticed that. When was Heavenly Blues published at first?
Heavenly Blues was published by Scout Comics from 2017 to 2018.
Oh, okay. So it was during the time of his prominence, as it
were.
Whatever the word is I would want to use for just the opposite whatever. Yeah. Okay.
Welcome to a game of Guess Our Politics.
But so that totally cracked me up. But yeah, I think when you're dealing with a science fiction story and people don't really know what are the laws of the universe, I like that you're doing this in a really character-driven way that I felt like a lot of the questions about the world that you might have, like they're just not stumbling blocks. Like you can just kind of just go and dive right into it.
Thank you. I mean, it's when you don't have like kind of a fantasy novel to really spread it out, I think it becomes important to really dive in on your POV character and really figure out what's important to them, what elements of the world are important and relevant to them, and figure out what you really need to tell or to make the world real, at least as the characters are going to be seeing it, and really dial in and make sure you're focusing on the stuff that really needs to be there, but also trying to, pack in as many fun extra details as you can to try to, even if it's just a one-line thing here that hopefully gets people thinking and imagining what it could be beyond what's actually there in the story.
So, yeah, what were those elements for this story to you?
So I think we needed to see, I think especially in the first issue, as much as like right away, I would have liked to have arguably directly shown what the effect of the reach rule would be. I couldn't figure out a way to do that without making it too, opening scroll, narrator, bad people doing bad things. So instead, I'm more trusted that if the book's called Gryffen, you open on Gryffen. If I trust the audience will be on their side and carry it, then maybe then their word is enough. That how they describe the reach, the sovereign reach, the reader will internalize that. Mm-hmm. And the book is called Gryffen. To me, it lives or dies on their character. So to let them be the introduction of the world, let their visceral reaction to the reach be the first thing the audience sees. I thought was an important thing to focus on. And then as you get to chapter 3, where we get more of a proper introduction, which will be coming out on June 5th, where we get more of a proper introduction to our main villain, Admiral Rosalind Hunter, where we actually get to directly see the effects, what it's like to be directly under reach, occupation, and rule. But now but by doing it in issue 2, instead of random alien species XYZ, we can now directly see that it's the species of Telika, who is the resistance member that we've now spent an entire issue following and going on this adventure with Gryffen. So it's not just a random alien world, it's now a world of a character we care about. So just trying to not branch out for all the tangents, but just try and make sure that as the universe gets bigger, it's through the character's eyes that it's getting bigger.
Oh, that totally makes sense. And it also connects to the stakes of why that character cares so much about what happens in that particular world, too. Yeah, so... And you also designed them as being... I'm sorry, what's the character's name with the letter T?
Telika.
Telika. So she's described as being an elf?
So to me, that was more kind of, I definitely kind of had in mind a bit of, space elves. Everyone likes space elves. But, kind of, your old classic Vulcan ears. So to me, it would just kind of, because humans are just fucking terrible and we're awful, elf would just become a slur that I feel like would become used very easily for Telika's people. So more just me techno-babbling a racial slur, which is terrible to say out loud.
But I think that's a smart way to do it, because you did it without using language that's actually offensive in real life, while making it clear that, that's what's going on, basically.
Yeah, oh yeah, I mean, to me, especially with this, where it's occupation, where it's you're dealing with so much colonialism, military-industrial complex, prison system. There's obviously stand-ins, but you have to consider what the limits and pitfalls of a stand-in are. So you want to try to get the general message across, but you never want it to be so specific that you're appropriating someone else's pain and struggle, especially if you're not part of it and you don't know how to properly represent that without metaphor.
Mm-hmm. Very well said, and definitely something people are talking a lot about right now. So you are, making science fiction in which you have the ability to have other kinds of alien races and planets look like anything you want. I mean, what kind of thought process do you have when you're designing? Obviously you're doing this in conjunction with the artist, but when you're designing conceptually, what different kinds of space civilizations and alternate worlds that you're going to be spending time in?
So we get to spend, some of it's just what do I think would be fun. In chapter 4, we get introduced to a new crew member who's just kind of, again, new kind of alien, me kind of thinking bird, mammal, amphibian, fish, just trying to think of, what are the various kinds of basic life we already have to think about, and okay, let's use that as a little bit of inspiration, like how if, you roll the die a little different and it's the goat people who ended up with the opposable thumbs and walking on 2 legs who figured it out. So kind of trying to part of it's just trying to imagine, okay, what if the cards got dealt a little differently and some species ended up with different traits that they ended up with, and you just ended up with different kinds of people. So you get some aquatic people, you get a planet full of bird people that we get to visit in issue 4, which, or chapters, I suppose that would be chapters 8 and 9, or, no, I'm sorry, 9 and 10. And and after a lot of, especially devastation that we see in what kind of makes up issues 2 and 3, on Teleka's home planet, where we see the effects of years or decades of Reach rule, we get to contrast that with a more thriving planet with a more vibrant culture, to kind of contrast a world that's already lost everything with a world that has everything still to lose.
See, that's really fabulous, because I don't know if you're watching the new Star Trek.
Yes.
I'm super behind. So this is basically just a reflection on season 1, even though I've watched, 7 episodes of season 2. But my complaint with Star Trek, was that it was, we looked to Star Trek to see a vision of a positive future. And yet in this time of great need, the new Star Trek was about war and a world where things, I don't know, nobody in that Star Trek world was dying because they couldn't get health insurance, but it certainly is not like future space utopia.
Yeah.
And so I was disappointed that it didn't really feel like it was venturing into ideas about things that would make the world better. And I think a lot of science fiction is dystopian because we sort of live in a dystopia, and it's easier to draw upon what the next step down the ladder would be, but people have a much harder time thinking about alternate modes of the future, and that's really a shortcoming. We have a saying, writer and theorist Adrienne Marie Brown, who was the creator of the book Octavius Brood, said that organizing is science fiction, is speculative fiction. When we say that we're going to come together and we're going to develop we're going to fight for a Green New Deal and have that Green New Deal become a reality, that's speculative fiction. We're envisioning a future that's different than the world we have right now, and then we're taking action to bring us there.
That's an interesting way of looking at it.
Yeah, Adrian's freaking amazing. So I think that's one of the reasons why there's such a deficit in that, and I'm really excited to hear that your comic is going to include a glimpse at a world that is a good place to be. Yeah,
and kind of, and that'll be one that hopefully kind of touches on, just trying to keep, to me, the Sovereign reaches all the terrible atrocities that mankind has built our civilizations on, so it's not, it's not a direct one-to-one for just what's going on. There's obviously, and you got your good old-fashioned Nazi party, but hopefully still even the Spanish conquistadors get thrown under the bus. So to me just calling out the sins that we've built. So hopefully, as we see how the Reach builds their empire, it maybe makes us reflect on some of the the terrible, awful things we've done to build our own civilization.
Totally. No, that's really important as well. What are
you were saying about dystopia and utopia? I feel like Gryffen's setting is maybe more dystopia, but I wouldn't call it dystopia. I'd almost call it more cathartic, where it's just taking all the terrible stuff we have to deal with and just creating a super, super angry, good with a sword avatar to just actually do something about it all. And just kind of be a bit of an agent of our frustrations, almost like how the Hulk can be sometimes.
I love it. And also, from the beginning of the story, they're primarily talking about like what they need to do for themselves, for their own freedom. And, and the other character,
Telika,
is the character who's sort of pushing them to be more concerned about the implications beyond just them individually.
To me, and you get more into the series goes on, is that Gryffen does think about the implications for everything constantly, and they're at a point where that's broken them. That is completely trying to figure out what could possibly be considered a good thing, an unambiguous right thing that makes the universe better. And when you think about it at the scale of changing not just planets, but entire solar systems and galaxies, the morality just fails. It just breaks down. Like, you can't just be unambiguously good at that stage. And I think almost like Telika, their view is completely macro, and to a point, morality is almost a Cthulhu monster that Gryffen has stared into and come back from slightly broken.
Oh, that's really interesting. So, what are some of your influences when working on this piece?
So I think there's definitely a bit of some bit of like Errol Flynn kind of swashbuckling, so like lightsaber sword going. I mean, to me, one thing that was important was, for as much as if Gryffen is going to be a character that we kind of champions violence and pursues violent solutions, and is someone I still want the audience to feel good about and kind of root for and feel about it. To me, it's important that the violence then kind of not be so real, not be that realistic. So it's not reflecting it. So it's important to me that for all of this crazy violence, Gryffen's using a sword, and they're storming starships with no magic powers and just a glowing pink sword, but just a sword. And it works, and they pull it off because they're just that good, and they're in this, and it's a story. But to me, it gives the violence a sense of unreality that I think is important. And I think with some of the messages with the way the character is, I think if they were, say, like the Punisher with a bunch of guns going around shooting people, I wouldn't be comfortable with a lot of what's in the book. So it's important to me to kind of avoid a lot of the real world violence that is such a big issue these days.
Got it. Yeah, and I understand that choice. I really do. I think that it's part of the humor of the book, and it definitely sort of, I like the Errol Flynn connection that you brought up there. I definitely see it in the character.
Yeah. And then, I think just, music is always a big influence for me when I'm writing. And what's so funny is that, to me, is that my taste can completely change depending on what I'm writing. So when I was writing Heavenly Blues, I was listening to a lot of electro swing music and old jazz. And now Gryffen has been a lot of 2000s LA girl punk bands has been the music of choice. So of Go Betty Go, the Donnas, Dolly Rots, Betty Blowtorch. So that's been fun, just always discovering a new genre of music. like I said, a lot of your sci-fi shows, especially your Firefly, Star Trek, Legends of Tomorrow, your basic kind of crew, your crew of misfits and hooligans going on wild science adventures. And also I hope that kind of real science is a bit of an influence, kind of thinking about science not just as an excuse for cool stuff to happen or as a MacGuffin, but to try to think about what it means and how its power to change a society, and maybe hang some tropes, maybe hang a lampshade on some tropes, and just try to make the science seem a bit more real and pursue science for its own sake rather than pursuing a plot.
I definitely feel like the theme of scientific exploration, like as its own discipline and intellectual piece, is significant from what I've seen already in the story. Yeah, definitely. I mean, their initial critique of the Galactic of the Reach is that like it's just using science for war and for like rockets that look like dicks, basically, I think is the joke that they make, and that's a and that's actually look at the death of creativity and innovation.
Yeah, absolutely. And just trying to show that stagnation and science denial that has come from just pursuing the single-minded goal of just better military, and a very simplistic idea of military at that. I think a lot of the pure focus for science for its own sake comes from the Elliot Dow character, who gets introduced in Chapter 2, which is out on ComiXology on May 15th. So that'll be out next week. And he's kind of your typical amoral scientist, but what's a lot of fun at Gryffen is taking a lot of the traditional villain tropes and flipping it around so those villain tropes become protagonist tropes. That's cool. Yeah, so there's a few kind of classic, where Gryffen finds themselves in a few classics, in some classic scenarios that happen, but they find themselves in the position that the villain is usually in, especially in regards to their relationship with Admiral Hunter.
I'm excited for that. That sounds like a lot of fun.
I still have the ending to write, and the series is really about these two people on a collision course, and I've never really written a story that was so focused on a single kind of protagonist-antagonist clash, and I'm so excited. And so far, and every time these characters are even just close to each other, it's been dynamite to write, so I cannot wait to finally set it all off.
So how many issues is the series going to be?
So it's going to be 6 issues, which, because we're releasing it on ComiXology in half-issue chapters coming out every 3 weeks, it'll be 12 chapters, priced for $1 each.
Gotcha. So yeah, that's the structural choice of viewing it as like chapters, etc., versus issues and all that. Like, what's your thinking behind that?
So that was partially a way of kind of getting content out to people a little faster, and also just kind of taking advantage of the digital first release to kind of just think about it in different ways. Releasing it in a format that you really couldn't as floppy in stores. And to me, it's also becomes it gives the series, I think, a bit of an interesting rhythm and pacing versus Heavenly Blues, which I think was at a much more slower pace.
Yeah,
I think,
definitely.
Gryffen, I think with Gryffen, I think it's very interesting that forced me to have kind of a scene, like a big scene change, or like have a big moment, not every 22 pages, but every 11 pages. So like the cliffhangers have to come faster, more rapidly. Big moments have to happen. So I think it's a format that lends itself to the kind of very like loud, rapid energy that I think the series operates at its best on.
Cool. Well, I'm really looking forward to being able to read the rest of it, and as it's coming out. And you said the next issue was out in June when?
So Chapter 2, which is the second half of Issue 1, is out May 15th, and then Chapter 3 It comes out June 5th, and then the Chapter 4 is out June 26th, and that wraps up issue 2. And then we're on to issue 3 in July.
Exciting. Well, I'm looking forward to everyone being able to check that out, because you don't even need to go to the store. You can just get it on your, portable device right away.
Quote, a fantastic sci-fi movie. I'd buy that for $1. Yeah, I went there.
I just rewatched that recently. Anyway.
Can I tell you, I didn't watch that movie until I was 21, and after I saw it, I felt like I'd loved it since I was 6.
No, I didn't see it until I was like 35 or something.
It's wonderful. It's such a good movie. I love
The Running
it.
Man, for those who may not. That's from The Running Man, right?
RoboCop.
RoboCop. Shit. No, I saw RoboCop a long time ago. Which I also recently rewatched. Okay. They have a lot of dystopian television. There's a lot of dystopian television in both of these.
It's the funny TV guy with the mustache and the glasses who keeps going, I'd buy that for $1.
RoboCop is super freaking good.
God.
It makes me sad that a lot of people don't seem to understand explicitly political content. I don't know how that's not clear to people what's going on with RoboCop.
Well, I hope they understand Gryffen.
Oh yeah. Well, I think you're not having the same quantity of mass. You know what I mean.
Not quite. I'll tell you this: the character is not the character, and what they believe and what they represent is not subtle. To give out of context line from a future issue, these people already invented capitalism. They were fucked with or without the reach.
Bam. That's badass.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about Heavenly Blues.
Yes!
That's a very special series. I've been really got super addicted into that one.
Thank you.
I feel like it's the kind of comic where it was about like I think it was when we sort of had the brief flashback into one of the main characters' backstories later on in issue 1 that I finally really got into it. But it's a different sort of story. It's a heist with folks who've been condemned to hell, trying to steal something from heaven, and you've got it's like some getting the group together issues, lots of different, a handful of, not lots of different, but a handful of characters whose sort of backgrounds you give them into, and all that. So talk to me about how that comic, the ideas behind that.
So the idea behind that, so I love heist stories. I love your Ocean's 11, The Sting, your Sly Cooper video game series. So I love the idea of doing a heist and like you said, and pacing it like a classic heist movie in a comic. So you're putting your band together issue. You're a big actor. You're scoping out, reconning the job issue, and then they pull the big heist. So, again, we were kind of talking about the pacing of Heavenly Blues versus Gryffen. Gryffen's kind of rapid-fire adventure versus Heavenly Blues' more slower, methodical build-up, then boom at the end. Now, so the original kind of germ of an idea was there's an Irish proverb, may you be in heaven half an hour before the devil knows you're dead. So from that, I got the idea of, what if you had half an hour to break into heaven before the devil comes after you? And, the plot obviously kind of moved away from that ticking clock devil aspect, but that became kind of the genesis of the idea of a heist story set in heaven and hell. Your Ocean's 11 in heaven. And then later on, I kind of let it stew. One of those instances where I had the right premise, but I didn't have the right story. I really wanted to do the kind of team as family dynamic, and really take characters from hell and give them that kind of heartwarming, finding yourself, being more than the sum of your parts dynamic. And from there, it all just kind of took off into this, Ocean's 11 meets The Good Place.
Oh, that is a good way to describe it for sure. You've got a really interesting cast of characters from like different sort of points throughout history. You have a character from the Salem witch trials period. You've got a character from ancient Egypt, and all the stuff around the Egyptians is really interesting. Someone from the Wild West, and someone from the 1930s. Am I forget? Oh, yes, you have an actual ninja.
Yes. I love Naruto, but not a Naruto ninja. I did a lot of research into him to try to get him as historically right as I could.
Yeah, I was going to say, so tell me more about your ninja.
So yeah, the ninja, I'm really proud of, and because I really tried to avoid the crazy wall running magic and tried to make him as real. So, not sure. I'm sure that there's a lot I missed and didn't get right, but he gets killed in 1582. He's as part of the Oda Nobunaga waging war on the Ida clan, which is a real battle, which really happened. So his is kind of based a little more on real life history than the others, but he was definitely an interesting character, kind of the respected community leader in life turned, pathetic drug addict, kind of a disrespected drug addict on the streets of hell, and seeing him kind of come back from that and go from being kind of just, their stealthy junkie on a leash to kind of getting his pride back and becoming more of a real member of the team. And to me, with Heavenly Blues, taking all the characters from different eras and putting them all together was, that was half the appeal of doing the book right there, was I couldn't think of any other way to take all these toys out of the toy box and mash them together without involving time travel. So it was fun not doing time travel, but instead having to conceive of and build through the afterlife setting, like this city of hell that you can imagine all these characters existing in and potentially interacting in.
That's really cool. If you're having a story about death and the afterlife, definitely ancient Egypt comes to mind right away too. And I like the sort of dive into someone's character's history as a as opposed to a tomb robber, and that sort of as an act of like class uprising.
Oh yeah, no, that was really interesting to see, just the sense of, and I tried to get a sense of how because especially in that, from what we know about their culture and religion that was so focused on death and all that, I was trying to understand, what would the mentality of a grave robber be? Would they be someone who actively rejected the religion and were, by our standards, more of an atheist? And what I kind of settled on instead was a sense of believing in the religion, but again, making it more of a class belief, where they believe that the rich died with so much that they don't deserve to have that much in death after having so much in life. So tried to make, tried to base it not so much more off religious rebellion and more, and really ground the character of Amunet in class resentment.
Yeah, definitely. And you've got another really cool queer character in the cast as Coin Counter.
Coin Counter Turner. Oh, my wonderful bi-cowboy.
It's a great gang. Not gangster. It's a gay. I guess I'm used to saying gangster. Whatever. It's like a great criminal name.
Yeah.
It's a great badass name.
So I kind of got that idea from how Doc Holliday got his kind of Wild West name, because he was a dentist. So I kind of took that inspiration, and after first getting the name Coin Counter because I like the name, and then working backwards from there to kind of establish his backstory as the young son from a banking family who went out west to make the best of his years, and very much made the best of them.
Yeah, I liked his journey west, and did your artist did he do colors for all of it too? Yeah, the color work on this is really freaking good.
Yeah, no,
his color work is really freaking good.
Wonderful.
Shifting between the different time periods and worlds in the series.
So that was a lot of fun. That was definitely fun, making Heavenly Blues a quintuple period piece and really getting to play in kind of the different genres, and trying to make it feel like a western, trying to make it feel like a old samurai movie, trying to make it feel like a gangster flick. Erin's, I wanted to have a bit of a Scarlet Letter vibe to it. So try to give each one a different feel, but also, and this was an influence I kind of got from Marvel's Netflix shows, where each of the Defenders characters kind of each had their signature color that they would wear, or would show up in lighting or in scenery, and I thought that was such a cool idea. So each of the 5 main characters has their own kind of signature color that you see in their clothing and outfits and narrative captions. But I thought what would really sell it was making those characters kind of the primary color of their flashbacks, as a way of really separating it, making it very clear what's flashback and what on Earth and what's present day in the afterlife, and really kind of making each flashback really kind of tied into that character and just strengthening the bond between key color and character.
Cool. Oh, that's really cool. Did you end up doing a lot of different kinds of research for the different time periods that you were working from?
For sure. I mean, different time periods required a bit of different kinds of research. For Amunet and Hideki, the Egyptian and the ninja, to me there it was, because those were other cultures was representing, I really wanted to, and because especially there was so much I didn't know about just the basic background, they required a lot of research to kind of figure out and get right and try to paint in more of the details and, knowing where to fudge, because, okay, traps and real pyramids weren't quite so Indiana Jonesy, but false tunnels aren't that fun to draw, so.
Ooh. Yeah, that is understandably the case.
Yeah, it's, so part of the historical research was knowing when consciously not to be historically accurate, like in the case of Erin. The Salem witch trials took place entirely during the summer, but I really wanted snow scenes.
That's fine.
So when it's a matter of historical accuracy versus I want to do a cool thing, the cool thing's going to win every time.
But the Salem witch trials, we know that was actually, a lot of it had to do with men stealing money from women, basically, right? And so you had, in your story, you just dive right into that historical truth that I think a lot of people don't even know.
I tried to make...
Right, everything's class war, people. Everything's class war.
It all comes back to that. Yeah, try to have Erin's character, and to me having Erin's character being someone that's trying to, doing it for purely just selfish reasons of just both greed and pure survival, trying to pull this scam and steal enough money to get out of Salem. But I think the fact that in her own mind, the fact that she was delivering a bit of karmic justice and was still punished for that, I think it's just one more thing that feeds into her sense of grievance, and that she got screwed over and was given a bad hand and doesn't deserve to be in hell.
Yeah, her pain and frustration is really powerful there. As a child, also, in particular, but except for she's like a former child who's now an adult, but is still stuck in a child body. I was sort of wondering about that theme. When she mentions in the first issue, she talks about would my body.
And to me, and to me, once you start thinking about the afterlife not as just the torture dimension, but as a place where people are existing and interacting and just being for decades and centuries at a time, what happens to people that die as children and are then children for literally centuries, that became that was one of the top things where I'm okay, well, I have to explore that. Gotta answer. I have so many questions about that. Gotta have a character to represent that and answer that. So kind of a lot of the themes and character arcs that kind of Erin embodied, those were all in the plot from a very early on, because I knew that was just a character that I was so fascinated to dig into, and they really did become just a character that really, I think, pushed me as a writer. A lot of their flashback scenes, I had to, hers was the only death scene I had to get up and go for a walk halfway through writing, just collect myself.
It's freaking hard. It's really freaking hard. So, I mean, are there, like, what is your, like, why is comics the medium that you really love to work in?
So, yeah, it's the medium I fell in love with. Comics just grabbed my heart in a way that, for as much as I love video games and movies and television, they never did. Comics are the one medium that I just felt, oh, I could do this. I could make this work. And it's just something about, I don't know, I can just I can just feel it, and it's just a medium that feels right to be working in. And the one-on-one collaboration with the artist, I think, is so great. Just this merging of two very, again, like a writer style and an artist style, two incredibly distinct talents, and the merging together of that every time you make a comic. I really love that. And, every medium's collaborative, but I think at the level of comics, when it's just a few creators, everyone's style is really able to come out to their fullest. And really it's a medium where I can tell the stories I want to tell. It's, if I was trying to make a TV show or a movie out of Gryffen, God, could you imagine trying to sell genderqueer anti-fascism to a studio?
They would be like, actually, you should make this character a white man, and we will cast an actor who's already in many failing movies in the role instead.
Also, what if capitalism is a good thing?
And nobody working in the production team will be female.
Yeah.
Fist bump.
So just compare the Kafkian labyrinth that is Hollywood versus, I had a story that I was passionate about. I was able to pull in the resources to get it fully produced and find a publisher, and now it's out on ComiXology, and anyone anywhere can buy it for $1. And that's really cool to me.
That is really cool. So who's your dream casting for Gryffen, the movie, if it was to happen? Obviously, an independent film, which we could have directed by, I think, Katrina Del Mar or some other queer filmmaker who's independent.
I think, you put her through like kind of the old Marvel method fight training. I feel like Jenny Slate would make an amazing Gryffen.
I love Jenny Slate, and the humor. I see the humor across both of the characters. Yeah.
Yeah. I just feel like she's so good at just playing characters at such different extremes that she can handle like just the snaps between dangerous and silly, which the character needs. Melissa Fumero would be my pick for Telika. So we can kind of just bring that exasperated yet sarcastic straight man style comedy. And Steven Yeun has really been is pretty much all my reference picks for Elliot Dow.
Cool. I do love some Steven Yeun because I have eyes. So
right?
Cool. Yes. Absolutely. Well, that is a really great casting combination for this. Have you seen any films by Katrina Del Mar? Because if you haven't, I need to make sure you watch her movies.
I don't think so.
Okay, I'll send you some links after the show.
Ooh,
I feel
yes,
like
please.
She and your aesthetic would be very aligned. She did the Gang Girl trilogy back in the late 90s, early aughts, which is like girl gangs on bicycles, girl surfer gangs, like I need to Lower East Side.
I need to be seeing these movies right away.
All homemade 16mm camera, like Super 8 in some cases. Yeah, no, I
need to be seeing these movies, and then come 2022, don't be surprised when the inspiration for a new comic series is very obvious.
No problem. Well, thank you for joining the show. Where can our listeners find your work online?
So, Heavenly Blues, all the individual issues and the complete trade paperback collecting the whole series can be bought from the Scout Comics website store, and that's just scoutcomics.com/store if you want to get specific. And Gryffen, Galaxy's Most Wanted, is available now on ComiXology. And
fabulous.
You can find me on Twitter at BenTheCon and at BenConComics.com.
To our listeners, don't forget, you can always find Graphic Policy online at graphicpolicy.com. This podcast is on SoundCloud and Stitcher and iTunes. Go to Graphic Policy for all your comics news and reviews. And of course, I am on Twitter. All too often at ELANA_Brooklyn. That's ELANA_Brooklyn. So keep it geeky.
Hey, thanks for watching the previous video from Graphic Policy Television. Just by watching, you help support our site. Thank you so much. Now, if you're watching these videos, you probably care about geeky things like movies, television, comic books, toys, games, video games, you name it. You can go and subscribe right now to our YouTube channel to stay in touch and catch all the new videos, or check out our website at graphicpolicy.com. There's a nice link on this end of the video. But as always, thank you for watching. Keep on rocking and keep it geeky.